In a world ruled by fear, one name was whispered in hushed, terrified tones: Draven the Unbroken, the Alpha King. A giant of a man carved from granite and rage, before whom every other alpha bowed and broke. For 12 years his rule was absolute, his heart a frozen fortress no one could breach. They said no woman would ever warm his bed, for no woman dared to even meet his gaze. They were wrong. Out of the weakest pack, from the deepest shadows of despair, one lone Omega stepped into the light. She wasn't an alpha, a warrior, or a princess. She was just a healer with nothing left to lose. And she was about to bring the most powerful werewolf on Earth to his knees. The King of Ice, Draven the Unbroken, had taken the throne of the combined territories 12 years ago, not through lineage, but through pure, terrifying force. His predecessor, a squabbling council of alphas, had let their lands fall to famine and rogue attacks. Draven, then just an alpha of the remote Ironwood Ridge Pack, had marched on the Obsidian Citadel and challenged every single council member. One by one, he had defeated them, his monstrous midnight wolf a thing of nightmare and legend. He was a giant, even in human skin, standing nearly 7 feet tall, with breadth of shoulder that seemed to block out the sun. His hair was black as a starless night, and his eyes were the color of a winter storm, chips of ice that saw everything and revealed nothing. He ruled with a fist of iron. Tributes were harsh, laws were absolute, and mercy was a forgotten word. Under his reign, the territories were stable, the rogues were annihilated, and the packs were secure. But they were also suffocating. This suffocation was felt most acutely in smaller packs like Moonwater. Their alpha, Marcus, was a man whose ambition had long outstripped his courage. He postured within his own territory, but trembled at the mere thought of the annual conclave of fealty, where every alpha presented tribute to the king in person. It was in Moonwater that Briar lived. As an Omega, she occupied the lowest rung of the werewolf hierarchy. But Briar had been born with a spirit that chafed against her designation. She was the pack's most gifted healer, her knowledge of herbs and poultices rivaling wolves 3 times her age. Her quiet life was shadowed by constant gnawing worry over her younger sister Lily. The girl was frail, afflicted with the fading breath, a sickness that stole her air and painted her lips a terrifying shade of blue. The cure was a rare high-altitude flower, the Stella bloom. It grew only on the slopes of the king's own mountain, and the tithe Draven demanded each year stripped their pack of the resources they needed to acquire it. The king's stability was costing Lily her life. This year the harvest had been poor. Moonwater had nothing left to give. The night before Alpha Marcus was to depart for the conclave, Briar was gathering herbs at the forest edge when she overheard his panicked voice. "We have nothing, Thomas. Nothing. The king will make an example of me. He will flay me alive in his throne room." "We could offer people," his beta suggested grimly. "Some of the younger Omegas. A tribute of flesh instead of gold. He might find that amusing." Cold dread washed over Briar. He wouldn't. He couldn't. But she knew Marcus. His fear would make him do anything to save his own skin. He would sacrifice Lily. He would sacrifice her. At that moment, something inside Briar snapped. She thought of Lily's shallow breaths, the sound that haunted her sleep. She thought of the king on his cold throne, demanding sacrifice without seeing the faces of the sacrificed. Fear was a poison, and it had infected her alpha. But Briar would not drink it. She slipped back to her cottage, packed a small satchel with dried meat, water, and precious remedies. She looked at her sleeping sister, face pale in the moonlight, and pressed a kiss to her brow. "I will not let you die," she whispered. Alpha Marcus was a coward. He would not stand before the king. Fine, she would. Into the lion's den. The journey to the Obsidian Citadel took 3 days of grueling travel through dense forests and over windswept hills. Fear was a constant companion, a cold knot in her stomach. But Lily's fading image was a fire in her heart that burned hotter than any fear. The obsidian citadel was not a castle. It was a scar upon the landscape. A fortress of black volcanic rock that clawed at the sky, surrounded by sheer cliffs and patrolled by warriors whose grim faces matched the stone. The air itself grew heavier as she approached, thick with the scent of power and something ancient and predatory, the overwhelming aura of the Alpha King. She arrived on the morning of the conclave. The great courtyard was a tense sea of werewolves from every pack. Hulking alphas flanked by their betas, their fine furs doing little to hide the anxiety that rolled off them in waves. They all fell silent when she walked past, a lone Omega, unescorted, walking toward the entrance of the great hall. It was like watching a lamb walk willingly into a wolf's den. The throne room was a cavern of shadows and echoes. At the far end of a long, black marble floor sat the throne, and upon it, the king. The stories had not done him justice. Draven the Unbroken was less a man and more a force of nature. His long black hair was pulled back from a face of hard angles and unforgiving lines. But it was his eyes that held the room captive, silver, glowing with faint inner light, missing nothing. He listened as alpha after alpha approached, knelt, and presented tribute with trembling hands. He rarely spoke, offering only a curt nod or a low, dismissive grunt. Briar watched from the shadows, her heart a frantic drum. She saw Alpha Marcus near the back, pale and sweating, trying to make himself invisible. Finally, the herald called, "Alpha Marcus of the Moonwater Pack." Silence. Marcus shrank further into the crowd. Thus, King's silver eyes narrowed, a low growl beginning to rumble in his chest, a sound that vibrated through the very stones. This was her moment. Before she could lose her nerve, Briar stepped out of the shadows. She walked down the long marble floor, each step echoing in the dead silence. She stopped a respectful distance from the dais, but she did not kneel. She did not bow her head. She met his gaze. "Where is your alpha?" Draven's voice was a deep, gravelly bass, a sound of grinding stones that held no warmth. "He is indisposed, Your Majesty," Briar said, her voice shockingly clear and steady. "I am Briar, a healer of Moonwater. I have come to speak for my pack." A murmur rippled through the assembled alphas. An Omega speaking for her pack to the king. It was unheard of. Draven's expression didn't change, but a dangerous light flickered in his silver eyes. "An Omega," he stated. "An insult. Your pack sends an Omega to beg for them." "I haven't come to beg, Alpha King," she replied, lifting her chin. "I have come to offer a bargain." Now the murmurs turned to gasps. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. Draven leaned forward slightly, his massive hands resting on the throne arms. The predator was now fully focused on the prey. "You are in no position to bargain. Your tribute is late, and your alpha is a coward. Your pack is forfeit." "Our pack is starving," Briar countered, her voice ringing with passion. "Your tithes are too high. You demand gold and grain, but you leave us with blight and sickness. My own sister lies dying because we lack the resources to acquire the herbs to save her. Is this the stability you offer? A quiet, well-ordered graveyard?" The throne room fell silent. No one had ever spoken to the king with such raw, accusatory truth. His guards tensed, hands flying to their swords. Draven rose slowly from his throne, a mountain uncoiling. He descended the steps and stalked toward her, his presence a physical blow that made her want to stagger back. But she held her ground. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she had to crane her neck to look up. The scent of him was overwhelming. Pine, winter frost, and pure, undiluted alpha power. For the first time, He truly smelled her. Beneath her fear, beneath her defiance, was a scent that cut through the haze of rage and power. Night-blooming jasmine and fresh rain. A scent of wild, untamed purity. It was a scent his wolf had been searching for its entire existence. Mate. The word slammed into his mind with the force of a physical blow. He froze, his body rigid, the silver in his eyes swirling like a captured storm. This defiant, impossible little Omega was his. Briar saw the shift in his eyes, the flicker of shock and confusion. She didn't understand it, but she knew it was her only chance. "Here is my bargain, King Draven," she pressed, her voice lower now, more intense. "Moonwater cannot pay its tribute this season, but I am the best healer in the northern territories. I have studied agriculture, crop rotation, soil renewal. Grant my pack a reprieve for 1 year. In return, I will give you my service. I will work in your greenhouses, tend to your sick, show your people how to triple their harvests. By next year, the territories will be so prosperous, our tribute will seem a pittance. Deny me, and you gain nothing but the dust of one more failed pack." Draven stared down at her, his mind a war zone. His alpha instincts roared at him to claim her, to drag her away, to mark her as his. His kingly discipline screamed that she was insubordinate, that he should make an example of her. But the calculating ruler saw the logic in her words. More than that, he was utterly, irrevocably intrigued. This creature was not a lamb. She was a lioness in a lamb's skin. He turned his head slightly, his gaze sweeping over the terrified alphas. "The conclave is concluded," he boomed. "Leave." There was a frantic scramble as the alphas practically ran from the hall. In moments, the throne room was empty, save for the king, the Omega, and his personal guard. Draven looked back down at Briar, the storm in his eyes unsubsided. "You have courage, healer," he rumbled, "or you are a fool. We shall find out which." He turned and began walking back to his throne. "You will not return to Moonwater. You will remain here at the Citadel. You will have my greenhouses and my medical wards. You will prove your claim. If you succeed, your pack will be spared. If you fail," he let the threat hang in the air, "you will learn what it truly means to defy a king." Briar's blood ran cold, but she did not let it show. She had stepped into the lion's den, and the lion had just closed the door behind her. The Baron Garden Briar was not led to a dungeon, but to a suite of rooms in the cold northern tower. Spartan but clean, with a narrow bed, a simple desk, and a window overlooking a bleak courtyard. It was a gilded cage, and she was its only prisoner. Her keeper was the king's beta, Gabriel, a man of average height, with sandy hair and hazel eyes that revealed little. He treated her with cool, professional courtesy that was almost more unnerving than open hostility. "The king has commanded that you be given all you require," Gabriel stated on her first morning. "The primary greenhouse is this way. It has fallen into disuse." Disuse was charitable. The greenhouse was a skeleton of rusted iron and shattered glass. Inside was a tangle of dead, thorny vines, the soil hard-packed and barren. It was a monument to neglect. A chill crept down Briar's spine. This wasn't a task. It was a sentence. He was setting her up to fail. "The king expects to see new growth before the first snow," Gabriel added. "The first snows on Ironwood Ridge often come early." He left her there alone in the graveyard of a garden. For a long moment, Briar felt crushing despair. She was alone, a pariah in the king's stronghold, given an impossible task with Lily's life as the price of failure. But then the image of Lily's smile, weak but precious, flashed in her mind. Despair was a luxury she could not afford. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. Her days fell into a grueling rhythm. She would rise before dawn, clearing the greenhouse shard by shard, vine by vine. The castle staff, under orders, provided tools but kept their distance, watching with pity and suspicion. She worked until her muscles screamed and her hands were raw and blistered. In the evenings, she studied in the Citadel's vast, dust-choked library, devouring books on mountain agriculture, botany, engineering. Draven watched her from a distance. He would stand at a high window in his solar, a shadow observing the small, determined figure toiling in the ruined greenhouse. His wolf was a restless beast in his chest, clawing at his insides, demanding he go to her, claim her, scent her. He fought it with the iron will that had made him king. A mate was a weakness. A connection was a vulnerability. His parents, the former king and queen, had been compassionate rulers who trusted their inner circle. They were murdered for it, betrayed by their closest friend. Draven had been 17 when he'd found their bodies. He had avenged them, bathed his claws in the traitor's blood, and sworn on their graves that he would never make the same mistake. His heart was a tomb, and it would remain so. But he couldn't stop watching her. He saw the way she meticulously tested the soil, adding nutrients. He saw her design a clever irrigation system using collected rainwater. He saw her patiently mending broken glass with salvaged materials. She did not complain. She did not weep. She simply worked. One evening, unable to stay away, he descended to the greenhouse. He found her standing in the center of the now cleared structure, sketching a design on a piece of slate. "You have cleared the rot," he observed, his voice making her jump. She turned, eyes wide for a moment before her composure settled. "The foundation is good. The structure is sound. It was just neglected." She looked him directly in the eye, and he felt the subtle challenge in her words. "Like you." "The soil is acidic," he stated, testing her. "The mountain's geology makes it so. Nothing of substance has grown here for a generation." "I know," she replied calmly. "I've been adding crushed eggshells and wood ash from the kitchens to neutralize it. It will take time, but it will recover." He was taken aback by the simple practicality. He'd expected supplication or fear. Instead, he got a botany lesson. It was infuriating and captivating. The scent of her, jasmine, rain, and now the clean smell of honest sweat and rich earth, was making his head spin. "Your sister," he said abruptly, the words feeling foreign. "What ails her?" Briar's posture stiffened. "It is called the fading breath, a sickness of the lungs. The cold, damp air exacerbates it. And the cure? A tea made from the petals of lunaria." "Celestis," she said, the technical name slipping out before she corrected herself. "The stella bloom. It only grows on sun-facing alpine slopes above the tree line. It is rare, and it grows on your lands." He said nothing, simply staring at her. She was not just a healer. She was a scholar. Her intelligence was as potent as her scent. He felt a dangerous, unfamiliar emotion unfurling in his chest. It felt terrifyingly like respect. "The first snow will be here in a month," he said, his voice a harsh rasp as he fought his inner turmoil. "Your time is running out, gardener." He turned and strode away before he did something foolish, like reaching out to brush the smudge of dirt from her cheek. Briar watched him go, her heart thudding. He was a terrifying, broken man, a king encased in ice. But she had seen something in his eyes again, that same flicker of confused humanity, and she sensed that the barren greenhouse was not the only thing in this cold, dark citadel she was being tasked to bring back to life. The breaking point. A month passed. Inside the greenhouse, a miracle was taking root. Under Briar's tireless care, the once barren soil was now dark and rich. Tiny green shoots pushed toward the light, hardy mountain vegetables, resilient medicinal herbs, cold weather grains. She had earned grudging respect from the castle staff. The cooks saved the best compost for her without being asked. A gruff old blacksmith named Jacob helped her repair the rusted ironwork. Her interactions with Draven remained strained and infrequent. He would appear like a storm cloud at the edge of her garden, his presence sucking the warmth from the air. He would ask curt questions about her progress, his silver eyes missing no detail. Each conversation was a battle of wills, a test of her nerve. And each time he left, she would sag with relief, her hands trembling slightly. The pull between them was a living thing, a taut wire of unspoken tension that left her breathless. She knew what it was. The ancient, undeniable call of the mate bond. It terrified her as much as he did. The breaking point came not from a word, but from a wound. Draven was training with his elite guard in the courtyard, a brutal, no-holds-barred display of combat. He moved with speed and ferocity unnatural for a man his size, his body a blur of controlled violence. During a sparring match with 3 warriors at once, one man, a new recruit, panicked. He feinted with his sword but lunged with a hidden dagger, a move of desperation rather than malice. Draven disarmed him with contemptuous ease, but not before the dagger's edge sliced deep across his forearm. It was a significant wound, gushing dark blood onto the cobblestones. The pack healers rushed forward, but Draven snarled, a sound more wolf than man, and waved them away. "It is nothing," he growled, his pride a shield thicker than any armor. He stalked back into the citadel, leaving a trail of blood behind him. Briar didn't hesitate. She grabbed her satchel of remedies and followed the trail to his solar. She found him standing by the fire, attempting to wrap the wound with a strip of cloth in his non-dominant hand. It was a clumsy, ineffective effort. "That needs to be stitched and cleaned, or it will fester," she said from the doorway. He spun around, his eyes blazing. "I didn't summon a healer." "I am aware," she said, stepping into the room. Her heart was hammering, but she kept her voice even. "But I cannot stand by while my king risks losing an arm to his own stubbornness. Your life is the life of the territories. To protect it is my duty, same as yours." Her appeal to his duty caught him off guard. He stared at her, jaw tight. Then, with a low growl of frustration, he slumped into a large armchair and thrust his bleeding arm toward her. "Be quick about it." She knelt before him, setting her supplies on the floor. Her hands were steady as she gently unwrapped the makeshift bandage. The cut was deep, right down to the muscle. "This will hurt," she murmured, beginning to clean the wound. He didn't so much as flinch, but she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, see the corded muscles in his neck. This was the closest she had ever been to him. The scent of him, pine and frost, was so potent it made her dizzy. As her fingers brushed his skin, a jolt like lightning shot up her arm. She saw his eyes flash silver, his nostrils flaring. The mate bond roared between them undeniable, sparking in the silence of the room. As she worked, threading a needle with sterilized gut, the silence stretched thick with unspoken things. "Why?" he finally rasped, his voice rough. "Why did you truly come here? Not for your pack, not for a bargain. You walked into my throne room expecting to die." Briar didn't look up from her work, her focus on the neat, precise stitches. "My sister Lily," she said softly. Her breaths are like whispers of snow. Each one could be her last. I would walk into 1,000 throne rooms if it meant she might see another spring. The raw, selfless love in her voice struck a chord deep inside him, a place he thought had died with his parents. He looked at the top of her head, at the way her simple brown hair caught the firelight. He had ruled for 12 years, surrounded by those who wanted his power, his title, his wealth. He had never been surrounded by anyone who simply wanted to save someone they loved. When she finished the last stitch and began applying healing salve, his hand, his uninjured one, moved of its own accord. His fingers brushed a loose strand of hair from her forehead. The touch was feather light, yet it seared them both. Briar froze, her breath catching in her throat. She slowly looked up, and for the first time, the ice in his eyes had melted. In their silver depths, she saw not a king or a monster, but a man drowning in a sea of loneliness so vast it stole her breath. He pulled his hand back as if burned. The mask of the king slammed back into place. But it was too late. They had both seen behind it. "My parents," he said, his voice a low, haunted whisper. "They were betrayed by my father's beta. His sworn brother, a man named Vincent. I found them in the throne room. Vincent was standing over them, a bloody sword in his hand. He smiled at me." Draven's bandaged hand clenched into a fist. "I was 17. My wolf took me. When the red rage cleared, Vincent and his co-conspirators were gone. I was left with a crown, a ruined kingdom, and one truth. Trust is a blade you hand to your enemy." Briar's heart ached. The tyrant king, the unbroken alpha, was a boy who had been forced to become a monster to survive. All his cruelty, all his harshness, was a desperate attempt to control a world that had ripped his own apart. She finished bandaging his arm, her touch lingering for a fraction of a second too long. "Trust is not a blade," she whispered, her gaze holding his. "It is a seed. If you plant it in barren soil, it will die. But if you nurture it, it can grow into a forest strong enough to hold up the sky." She stood, gathered her things, and left him there, sitting in the firelight, staring at the arm she had mended. Draven did not move for a long time. The physical wound on his arm barely registered. It was the other wound, the ancient, festering one on his soul, that had just been touched by something that felt dangerously like healing. And the Omega healer was the one holding the cure. The conspiracy Briar's act of healing the king sent shockwaves through the obsidian citadel. Whispers followed her now, not of scorn, but of awe and curiosity. Draven, for his part, was a man in conflict. He found himself manufacturing reasons to visit the greenhouse, now a thriving oasis of green. He would ask about soil pH or germination rates, but his questions were flimsy pretexts. What he truly wanted was to be near her, to breathe in her scent, to listen to the calm, steady sound of her voice. He began requesting her presence at his evening meals. They would sit in the cavernous dining hall and speak of her work. He never spoke of his past again, but she could see the war still raging behind his eyes. He was thawing, and this change was not going unnoticed outside the citadel's walls. News of the Omega Queen, as some were calling her, spread like wildfire. To many, it was a sign of hope. To others, it was a sign of weakness. One such alpha was Lord Damien of the Steel Fang Pack. Ambitious, handsome, and utterly ruthless, Damien had long coveted Draven's throne. He saw Draven's iron-fisted rule not as strength, but as brittleness that could be shattered. The appearance of Briar was the crack he had been waiting for. Damien began subtly stoking fires of dissent, speaking of the king's unnatural preoccupation with an Omega. He found a particularly eager ally in Alpha Marcus of Moonwater, humiliated and desperate for revenge. But their conspiracy had a third, far more dangerous member, one hidden in plain sight. Gabriel, the loyal beta, the king's right hand. He was not loyal. Gabriel was the son of Vincent, the man Draven had slaughtered for treason 12 years ago. He had watched from the shadows as Draven's rage had descended upon his family. He had survived only by hiding his identity, changing his name, and biding his time. He had worked his way up the ranks with impeccable loyalty and efficiency, becoming the one man the king who trusted no one, almost trusted. His hatred for Draven was a cold, patient thing, a poison he had nurtured for 12 long years. Briar's arrival had been an unforeseen complication. At first he saw her as a threat to his plans, but now he saw her as the perfect weapon. She was Draven's sole vulnerability. To destroy her would be to destroy the last flicker of light within the king, plunging him into a darkness from which he would never return. Gabriel played his part perfectly. To Draven, he was the concerned beta, Alpha, the other packs are restless. They see your favor toward the Omega as a sign that you are losing your edge. To Briar, he was a sympathetic ally. The king is a difficult man. He has been alone for so long. Your presence here, it is a good thing. But be careful. Many are jealous of your influence. He was a master manipulator, subtly poisoning Draven's mind with doubt while positioning himself as Briar's confidant. The twist of the knife came with the stella blooms. As the first snows began to dust the highest peaks, Briar knew time was running out for Lily. She had proven her worth tenfold. The greenhouse was a marvel, and she had helped the castle healers diagnose and treat dozens of ailments. She finally gathered the courage to formally petition the king. She found him in the strategy room, staring down at a map of the territories. "Draven?" she began, using his name for the first time without a title. He looked up, his silver eyes softening almost imperceptibly. "The first snow has fallen on the peaks? My sister—" "I know," he interrupted, his voice low. "I have not forgotten my promise." He turned to Gabriel, who stood silently in the corner. "Gabriel, assemble a party of 5 of my best foragers. They will escort the healer up the eastern slope at dawn. They are to bring back enough stella bloom to last the winter." "Of course, my king," Gabriel said with a smooth bow. But inside his mind was racing. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. That night, Gabriel sent a secret message to Lord Damien. "The prize leaves the fortress at dawn. Eastern slope, near the old Hunter's Pass. Make it look like a rogue attack. Leave no survivors." He then went to Briar's chambers. "The king is placing great trust in you," Gabriel said warmly, "and in me to arrange your security. But I must confess I am worried. The eastern slope is known for rogue wolf activity. Draven's guard is the best, but I fear 5 may not be enough." Briar looked up, concern flickering across her face. "What do you suggest?" "I have taken the liberty of arranging a contingency," Gabriel said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "A small secondary party of my own loyal men will travel by a different route and meet you near the summit. They will ensure your absolute safety. But the king must not know. His pride would be wounded if he thought I questioned his judgment. This will be our secret." Briar, who had come to see Gabriel as a reasonable friend, felt a wave of gratitude. "Thank you, Gabriel. I am in your debt." "Think nothing of it," he said with a small smile. "We all want what is best for the kingdom." He walked away, the perfect picture of a loyal beta. But in his heart, cold triumph bloomed. He had just sent her into a perfectly orchestrated trap. Draven's guards would be overwhelmed by Damien's men, and his own loyal men would be there not to save her, but to ensure that if Damien failed, she would not make it back down the mountain alive. Either way, by sunset tomorrow, the king's mate would be dead, and Draven's world would finally, irrevocably, break. The mountain's fury. The ambush came without warning. Briar climbed with Draven's 5 best guards toward the old Hunter's Pass, hope for Lily, a small warm fire in her chest. The king had given her a small carved wolf pendant before she left, a token of his protection. She clutched it in her pocket, the smooth wood a connection to the complicated Alpha, who was slowly letting her past his walls. They were nearing the pass when the pristine silence shattered. A dozen warriors, their pelts marked with the snarling steel fang of Lord Damien's pack, burst from the trees. They were not desperate rogues. They were a disciplined war party. Draven's guards, though elite, were overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The world became chaotic, clanging steel and the guttural snarls of shifting wolves. The captain shoved Briar behind a boulder. "Stay down!" he roared before the battle consumed him. Panic seized her, but it was quickly followed by cold, sharp clarity. She watched as one of the steel-fang warriors cut down a guard and turned his leering gaze on her. But before he could advance, another man intercepted him, driving a sword through his chest. For a fleeting second, relief washed over Briar. It was one of Gabriel's men, the contingency party. Then the man turned, and she saw his eyes. There was no rescue in them, only the cold, hard purpose of an executioner. The horrifying truth hit her like a physical blow. Gabriel hadn't sent a rescue party. He had sent assassins. The trap wasn't just for her. It was designed around her. Back at the Obsidian Citadel, Draven paced his solar, a caged beast tormented by danger he could not see. The mate bond was a frantic, screaming thing in his soul, a phantom cord being stretched to its breaking point. He could feel her terror, as if it were his own. "My king, you seem troubled," Gabriel said, entering the room with his usual placid demeanor. "She is perfectly safe. As I assured you, I sent a secondary party." "You," Draven whispered, the single word dripping with dawning apocalyptic fury. He turned from the window. The silver in his eyes began to burn with the light of a dying star. Gabriel saw the look on his king's face and knew the game was over. His calm mask fell away, replaced by a triumphant sneer. "She was your weakness, Draven. Your one flaw, a disease, and I have cured you." The rage Draven had kept chained for 12 years didn't just break free, it vaporized its restraints. He didn't roar. The transformation was so violent it seemed to suck the air from the room. His human form ripped apart as the monstrous midnight wolf of legend burst forth, a creature of nightmare and power. With a snarl that shook the citadel to its foundations, the Alpha King launched himself from the window, landing in the courtyard below, and sprinting toward the mountain. A black thunderbolt of pure vengeance. On the slope, Briar scrambled away from Gabriel's assassin. Her mind raced. Betrayal. It was all a lie. Just as the assassin raised his sword for the final blow, a howl tore through the air, a sound of such world-breaking fury that it vibrated in her very bones. It was Draven. The assassin froze, his eyes wide with primal terror. In that moment of hesitation, Briar acted. She grabbed a heavy, jagged rock and slammed it into the back of his knee. With a wet crack, the joint gave way, and he went down, screaming. Briar didn't look back. She scrambled up the rocky side of the ravine, her hands raw and bleeding. From her new vantage point, she saw him arrive. Draven was not a wolf fighting. He was a natural disaster. He crashed into the remaining Steelfang warriors, a whirlwind of claws and teeth, dispatching them with horrifying ease. Bodies flew like rag dolls. The snow turned crimson. It was then she saw the assassin she'd crippled, crawling toward a discarded crossbow. He loaded it with shaking hands and took aim, not at the rampaging king, but directly at her. He knew what would truly destroy Draven. "Draven!" she screamed. His massive wolf head snapped up. He saw her. He saw the assassin. He abandoned his prey and launched himself toward her, but he was too far. The bolt flew, a black streak against white snow. She braced for impact. It never came. The guard captain, the man she thought was already dead, had used the last of his strength to lurch to his feet and throw himself in front of her. The bolt struck him squarely in the chest. He collapsed at her feet with a final shuddering gasp, his last act one of perfect loyalty. The sacrifice, and the king's terrifying arrival, broke the attackers completely. The survivors dropped their weapons and fled into the woods. Draven reached the ridge, shifting back into his human form in a swirl of primal energy. He was naked, splattered with blood, but he had eyes only for her. He rushed to her side, his hands hovering over her, frantically checking for injuries. His face was a mask of raw terror and profound relief. "You're alive," he breathed, the words ragged. Briar's gaze moved from the dead captain at her feet to the carnage below, then back to the man who had torn the world apart for her. Her strength gave out, and she collapsed into him. He caught her, wrapping his arms around her, holding her so tightly she could feel the frantic beat of his heart. Surrounded by blood and betrayal, the Alpha King finally held his mate. And the cold of the mountain was no match for the fire burning between them. Justice and judgment. The return to the obsidian citadel was a grim procession led by a king whose silence was more terrifying than any roar. Draven himself carried the body of the loyal captain, laying him upon a ceremonial bier in the center of the great hall. Gabriel, they discovered, had vanished the moment he knew his plan had failed. Draven's justice was swift and absolute. "This is the price of betrayal," he boomed to his assembled warriors, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "Gabriel conspired with Lord Damien and the coward Marcus to murder your future queen. Hunt them down. Bring me Damien and Marcus in chains. But Gabriel, you bring his head to me on a spike." The king's wrath swept across the territories like a storm. Within days, the traitors were dragged back in chains. The final confrontation took place in the throne room, the same hall where Briar had first defied him. Damien and Marcus knelt, trembling, but Gabriel, though wounded and captured, was defiant to the last. "I want to know why," Draven demanded, his voice a low growl from the throne. Briar stood beside him, her hand on his arm, a silent, unwavering source of strength. Gabriel laughed, a dry, broken sound. "My father was Vincent. You murdered him on this very floor for daring to believe your father was weak. I have spent 12 years dreaming of this day, of leaving you as broken as you left me. Your father was a traitor who murdered his king and sworn brother for power," Draven stated, his voice flat and cold. "I gave him justice. He was a visionary," Gabriel spat, "and you were becoming just like your father, soft, letting an Omega poison your mind." Draven rose, a towering figure of judgment. "You're right. I was becoming my father. I was embracing his strength, which you mistook for weakness. Briar did not make me weak. She reminded me that a kingdom held by fear alone is brittle. It needs a heart." He gestured to the guards. "Damien and Marcus will face trial, not summary execution." Draven's reign of pure vengeance was over. "But you," Draven said, his silver eyes locking onto Gabriel, "your crime was personal." The duel that followed was not a contest. It was an exorcism. Draven fought not with blind rage, but with the focused power of a king protecting his future. He dismantled Gabriel's defenses with surgical precision. He ended the fight, and the cycle, of hatred his father's death had begun, with a single, precise blow. The ghost of the past was finally laid to rest. The thaw. In the aftermath, a heavy silence fell over the citadel. Draven, though victorious, was shattered. The betrayal of the man he had almost trusted had ripped open the old wounds of his parents' murder. He retreated into the cold fortress of his soul, pushing everyone, including Briar, away. She found him in his solar, staring into the flames, a king drowning in the ghosts of his past. "You think you are a curse," she said softly, walking to stand before him. "You believe you bring ruin to everyone you let close." "Look at the evidence," he rasped, his voice hollow. "My parents, my captain, Gabriel." "Stop!" she commanded, her voice ringing with strength that cut through his despair. She took his face in her hands, forcing his haunted silver eyes to meet hers. Their choices were their own: greed, loyalty, hatred. Those were their paths. They do not define you, and they will not define me. She pressed her forehead against his, a gesture of profound intimacy. "I am not your weakness, Draven. I am your strength, and you are mine. Stop trying to bear the weight of this crown alone. Let me help you carry it." A tremor ran through his massive frame. A single tear, the first in 12 years, traced a path down his stone-carved cheek. He pulled her into a desperate embrace, burying his face in her hair, breathing in her scent of jasmine and rain, as if it were the only air in the world. He finally let go of the pain, the loneliness, the belief that he was destined to be a monster. In its place, he allowed her love, the unwavering truth of the mate bond, to flood his soul and make him whole. That night, their mating was a sacred vow. Two fractured souls forging an unbreakable union. A new dawn. The dawn that followed was the dawn of a new era. A royal decree and a wagon filled with supplies and the precious Stella bloom flowers were sent to Moonwater. Lily would see another spring. Draven stood on the balcony overlooking his kingdom, but he was not alone. Beside him stood Briar, his queen. He was still the Alpha King, a figure of immense power, but his strength was now tempered by her compassion, his rule guided by their shared wisdom. The unbroken king had finally been healed by the one fearless Omega who dared to stand before him and see not a monster, but a man. And so the reign of the Alpha King was transformed. The fear he once commanded slowly turned to fierce, unwavering respect, not just for his power, but for the wisdom of his Omega Queen. Briar not only healed a king, but an entire kingdom, proving that true strength isn't found in a closed fist, but in an open hand. The greenhouses flourished, the territories prospered, and in the cold fortress of the Obsidian Citadel, warmth finally returned. Their story reminds us that even the hardest hearts can be taught to love again, and that the quietest voice can roar, loud enough to change the world.